Life moves along with its ups and downs, its cyclical rhythms. We move close and draw apart and come back together. And then something big happens and a silence descends. Suspended animation. Shock. So much changed with lockdown. Before the pandemic, I had a painting practice, one small piece a day, usually of the animals that were in my care. With lockdown, I lost that practice and didn't find it again for several months. When I did, I began painting the ravens who live in the old pecan orchard that surrounds our house. It was sort of a joke, corvids in a time of COVID. I thought I would do a series of 19, but by the time I painted COVID-19, the virus in our area was out of control. We'd lost a friend and others were sick, and the joke wasn't funny. I painted a 20th bird, and then I just kept going. For me, drawing and painting have always been more about meditation than about making art. From my first life drawing class, the verb that has come to mind is participation. For in close observation, the veil between self and other dissolves. This is true whether I am working from life, from my own photographs, from imagination, or studying wildlife videos frame by frame to understand the underlying structure of bone or the mechanics of flight. At the same time as I was painting these birds, I was deepening my meditation practice, finishing up a 2-year meditation teacher training program and beginning a study of contemplative care, a first step towards hospice or hospital chaplaincy. I was not raised in a religious home, and I do not consider myself a religious person, but I'm deeply engaged in the human spirit. And under lockdown, when so many of us were so deeply dispirited, finding my way towards spiritual care was a life raft of sorts, a way to combat my feelings of helplessness and imagine being of service in a time of need. At first, I didn't think these birds had much to do with contemplative care. In fact, they seemed like a guilty pleasure, because on a busy day, if I had to choose between painting or meditation, I would paint. Deep inside, I knew that each part of one's life supports every other part, but there's a difference between knowing something and really knowing it. The connection began to come into focus when I encountered an unfamiliar term in my training, care partnership. I don't have a background in the caring professions. I grew up on an isolated ranch in Wyoming, and I came to contemplative care in part in order to grow beyond the extreme individualism and insularity that was my conditioning from childhood. Care partnership. The term was new to me and somewhat perplexing. But then, one day when I was looking at blue jays, it struck me. Showing up, presence, listening not only with the ears, but also with the eyes and the soul. And there were other connections. As the death toll from COVID kept rising, I read in the journal Science that bird populations in the U.S. and Canada have dropped by some 3 billion birds over the past 50 years, as if the avian world were experiencing a slow-motion devastation that presaged our own. The philosopher, theologian, and ornithologist Charles Hartshorne talked about the devoted witness of birds as a practice where life touches life, which can be said as well of care partnership. And the willingness to be fully present when life touches life is a willingness as well to attend to sickness and death. Prayer had not figured prominently in my life before. And then I was introduced to the work of the Irish poet and peace activist Pádraig Ó Tuama and the ancient prayer form of the collect. Pádraig reminds us that the word prayer comes from the French prier, which means to ask. To pray, whether in a secular mode or a consecrated one, is to grow increasingly intimate with what we care about most, and so the collect helps me collect my thoughts. Dear winged ones, who see everything we do and sing to us anyway, let us hear the music in the pain and the pain in the music, that we may learn to sing through our ability to listen. I ask this in the name of the feather that falls towards earth and rises on an updraft and then floats down again. Dear waddling duck, who wraps your downy grace in comedy, help me accept my clumsiness along with my good faith, so I can hear the still small voice beneath my constant quacking. In the name of all the webfoots who waddle toward water, let it be. Dear tiny hummingbirds, who for your size have bigger hearts than any other creature, remind us that we are stronger than we know, and tell us too that unlike you, we have enough, and it would behoove us if we learned to share. Amen. Dear red-crowned cranes of Hokkaido, who dance today because a single farmer saw your hunger and brought grain, remind us that a caring act can start the restoration that saves the world. In the names of all those brought back from the brink of extinction, and especially in the names of those who didn't make it, hear our prayer. I want to say a word of praise for the bird of praise, for all the ways that beauty tells us to keep going through the darkest night, and from our loads lets us take flight in a simple act of caring for another.
On the wings of a dove, on the wings of a prayer, it's the hope of all people for a life that is fair, where all God's religions don't shout out so loud, and they all work together, bringing hope to the crowd. Silver dove, come take our prayers, lift them to heaven,